Hey, welcome back to the podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Mike T. Nelson. On this podcast, we talk about all things to increase your performance, add muscle, improve body composition, all without destroying your health within a flexible framework. And today, recording this from Mexico, we're down here working for a couple of weeks. The program, we've got the great James LaValle, which is awesome. So fun talking with him. I followed James' stuff for probably well over almost maybe 20 years, probably longer than that. I remember getting Cracking the Metabolic Code a long time ago when it first came out. I recently picked up his book on blood work, which is amazing. Highly recommend that. And all the wonderful stuff he's got going on. We got to chat about everything from liposomal delivery, different types of supplements, what would be best, how you think about blood work, magnesium. I remember using a lot of his information on magnesium years ago, and I forgot about it and started using it again, and it's been extremely beneficial. So make sure to check out all the wonderful stuff he's got going on. Make sure to check out his supplement line, which I have used some of his products. I don't have any disclosures with them, but they've been super useful. And this show is brought to you by Tecton Ketone Esters. I was out with those guys in Denver, Colorado last weekend, doing some filming, got to do some taste testing. Really cool stuff coming out from them. Not at liberty to say what it is yet, but hopefully we'll be able to give you all the lowdown once it's publicly available in a couple months. So look for some really cool stuff coming out from them. In the meantime, you can check them out at their website down below. If you order, use the code Dr. Mike. I am a scientific advisor to them and an ambassador, so I do make some money there in terms of disclosures. Also check out our friends over at Element. I brought a crap ton of Element down here to Mexico since it is pretty warm. I did get to kiteboard 2 days ago in light wind, which was great. So if you're looking for a tasty electrolyte supplement, check them out. My favorite right now is still the raspberry. It's a tie between the raspberry and the grapefruit. And if you want more information from me, check out my newsletter. We'll have a link down below. You get daily updates and all the great stuff, free information going out there. So without further ado, here is our epic chat with the one and only James LaValle. Dr. James LaValle, how are you, sir?
I'm doing great.
Thank you so much for
Getting
being here.
after it, as usual.
Yeah. I was first introduced to you through your Cracking the Metabolic Code book when it first came out. And I remember reading that and going, wow, this is cool. There's a lot of stuff about metabolism that I didn't learn in school, but it was also very application based at the same time, which to me, except for the harder core biochemistry area, was a new revelation. Like, what kind of made you start down that path? Obviously, your background is in pharmacy.
Yeah, well, I was training when I was 13 years old, so I've always had an interest. So the last now 50 years of working out, and I was always fascinated by, well, how am I going to perform better? And that led me to understanding, well, your body works together as one organized system. I was fortunate in my education and my mentors to always approach things from a systems biology approach. Cortisol doesn't act alone. Neither does testosterone, neither does insulin, neither does glucose. All of your body systems are working together. And you're only as good as your weakest link. And I was fortunate that I was seeing 300 to 400 people a week at my institute in Ohio. And I just sort of seeing these patterns that were evolving. And that's what really got me thinking about writing the Metabolic Code book. It's getting people to understand more thoroughly, why do you feel the way you feel, and where is that going to take you if you don't do something about it? And I've got my next edition of the Metabolic Code will be coming out this year,
That was one of my questions.
it's going deeper. Along with a book on human performance, I've got already, they're both written. I just got to go through final edits on them. And it's really getting people to understand that things don't happen to your body by chance. They happen because of a progressive march through metabolic inflammation, otherwise known in the literature as metabolic inflammation leads to inflammaging. And then the other thing that always crossed my mind because of my work with a lot of athletes was there was always this disconnect behind biomechanics and biochemistry.
Oh yeah.
And yet you can't separate the two. You
Yeah.
can have an injury that causes a lot of pain, and all that pain signaling is doing is changing your biochemistry, right? Your mood gets flat, you get depressed if the pain's long enough. And the same thing, you could be eating the wrong foods, not sleeping well, triggering low-grade inflammation, and now you're exercising. You can't figure out why you're getting sore. And so I think my first presentation I gave on metabolic code was 1997.
Oh wow, that's wild.
Yeah, and all I've done is keep building on the model. The model is whole body metabolism. Everything is connected. The inputs or the stressors that affect your body then start to affect change. And you either are in homeostasis, you're able to recover, you're able to be anabolic, you're not in an inflammatory stance, or you're either there or you're on your way to it. So that was the whole thing about the metabolic code and what got me going.
Yeah, one experiment for, I'll say, athletes who don't want to buy in, who are resistant to just pretty much everything else I've tried to do with them is, okay, let's run your experiment. Like you eat like a floating trash bin fire. We're going to push training volume. We're going to make sure you're still training. You do you, bro. You do your lifestyle. We're going to track resting heart rate, HRV. We could check some blood markers if we want. We're going to have some solid outcome metrics. We're going to look at your performance, even how you feel. And the handful of people who have gone down that route after 3 to 5 weeks have all come back and said, oh, I totally forgot how crappy I feel and how bad this really is. Maybe there's something to this nutrition stuff. I'm like, ah.
Nah, there isn't. I was
Ah.
just kidding you.
Yeah.
Right?
And the flip side too, I've had a few people now where mechanically we didn't do anything to them really per se. They did some training, but they were such a train wreck, we couldn't do a whole lot. But their diet was a complete disaster. And they didn't want to do any training. So I said, okay, that's fine. Let's just focus on nutrition. You want to make changes there. And in a couple of cases, just doing nutrition only, one person, his pain dropped by almost 80%. His movement got better. And he's just, I can't believe this. This is so crazy. I'm like, but like you said, it's all one system. And when you're really pushing the extreme on one end, you're going to have more effects to the other system than what you realize.
Oh, without a doubt. And I've always tried to create practical approaches to it. What can you really do? What can you accomplish? Hey, you've got folks that today it's like, hey, I've got to do my cold plunge. I got to put my Faraday glasses on. I got to get out in the sun. I gotta. And before you know it, you're stressed out over the fact that you're not getting all the things in you're supposed to do. And same thing with food. Oh my God, did you put aluminum foil around that baked potato before you baked it? Right. And all
How dare
that.
you?
And yes, exactly. It's terrible. And I really think that there's just this general ignorance still that pervades performance, what I call performance health. Whether you're an
Mm-hmm.
athlete or you're an attorney, you don't want to be tired midday. You don't want to get gassed. You don't want to be feeling like you're pushing a thought through jello at 5 o'clock, right? And people get amazed that when they eat better, they feel better. Or when they start to move, they feel better. And I always chuckle at it. It's, well, you can look at the long-lived cultures and see what they do. They move and they eat pretty good food and they end up living a pretty long time. And but we still look for more of a magic bullet or as better than I do. I've been around enough strength coaches and we've got the similar friends.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and they're not in this camp, but we know a lot of folks that it's still just push hard,
Mm-hmm.
just work hard, right? And the training load is very heavy. I think in teen athletes in particular, they're not little humans yet, especially the preteens that are
Oh,
training
yeah.
4 hours a day when they're 11 years old. Yeah, it's like, can they play? Are they allowed to play? Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's the other piece is people don't understand that it's all about how much you are able to recover as much as it is how hard you're able to train. So the recovery piece, the rest piece, the nutrition piece is really how you get the better performance and better health. And the other thing is, especially when we look to I know I lived through this because of my son, who was a two-sport all-state athlete in the state of California, and I'd watch other parents. My son had the nervous system to be that type of athlete, and I wouldn't let him overdo it. These other parents that are taking their kids to a pre-practice workout,
Oh,
and then
jeez.
there's a 2-hour workout. And
Oh,
it's got to be fun. Don't forget, there's a fun factor in this. So it's interesting, really.
yeah. And you see some of the nutrition logs from them, and you're just like, oh my, like you're trying to do all of this on the what?
Chicken
Like
nuggets.
you got to be kidding me.
Yeah, chicken nuggets and pizza. Pizza's great
Yeah.
because it's all four foods. You should have it every day. Italian, I could almost argue it, but even I know that's not the case. Yeah, it's the whole aspect of eating to order to be able to perform better is a massive issue, because what I find is that people are, whether it's a teen or an adult,
Yeah.
they're just deficient in micronutrients. They don't have
Hmm.
magnesium. They don't have enough potassium. A lot of them are iron deficient. Their ferritin pools are low, and they're wondering why they're winded, and they're wondering why they're getting leg cramps, and they're wondering why. The big thing I always talk about is brain coherence. When you don't have your body optimized, you start getting your core body temperature going up. Now all of a sudden your brain is trying to tell your muscles what to do, and your muscles going, what? What do you want me to do again? I thought I was going to get to that puck. I thought I was going to catch that ball. I used to be able to do that. And a lot of that just stems from the fact that they've created so much sympathetic dominance. And so for the people listening, sympathetic dominance is you're always throwing out adrenaline and noradrenaline. You're always running from a white tiger. And people don't understand that the rest phase, even on a muscle contraction, is every bit as important as the contraction phase. And it's getting people to understand that overtraining really isn't smart.
How do you get people out of that kind of sympathetic side? And I've had this chat with like our mutual friends, Cal Dietz, many times. I've had long chats with this about Jim Snyder, and both of them have said the professionals they've worked with who have the longest career, like they're all athletes who can be on when they need to be on and be off when they're off. I remember Jim even saying you might get a few sympathetic monsters in the NHL for a few years, but they're not the people who are going to play for 10 years. And I think that's interesting. So how, one, do you agree with that? And then two, if so, how do you try to balance that? What are things you look at for that?
Yeah, great question. One, I completely agree with it. I think that the first thing is you've got this sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. Parasympathetic nervous system is anti-inflammatory. Sympathetic is pro-inflammatory. So if you stay in sympathetic tone, you're creating a pro-inflammatory chemistry with reduced blood flow and microcapillary circulation, because when you're kicking out all that adrenaline, noradrenaline, the blood vessels are getting stiff and they're getting smaller. So over time, under sustained stress, you develop more ischemia, you develop more lactate, you create more problems in the fascia, right? Because now you got a
Yeah,
lot of
I've seen that if you
lactate
do
in the
hands-on work,
fascia.
you'll feel it just, it feels like everything is just like wound tight, like everything.
Yeah, yeah, and hard.
Yes, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, a lot of pain when I touch there.
Oh
And
yeah.
and so I think I totally agree that you have to learn how to turn off resting heart rate, 2-minute heart rate recovery, looking at your HRV, looking at recovery. People need to do those things to say, well, am I ready for a hard day of work tomorrow? Because if you're not ready for a hard day of work tomorrow and you push, I got to go get that white tiger juice again. I'm going to go get that sympathetic monster energy going. I'm going to hit that 1,200 milligrams of caffeine during my day,
1200.
you know,
When you measure your
right?
caffeine
I mean, my
intake in grams,
record.
bro, you got some issues.
Yeah. Oh, no, I had a pro athlete that drank 32 mellow yellows a day.
Whoa.
Amazing, right? And nobody could
Yeah.
figure out why he was having stomach problems.
I I have an idea.
No, nobody even bothered. Like, we've scanned him, we've scoped him, we can't figure this out. We're gonna send him over to the witch dye or send him over to LaValle. And the first thing I asked was, well, what do you eat? He goes,
Yeah.
what do you mean? So I said, didn't anybody ask you what you eat?
Yeah.
He's like, no.
No.
Oh, okay. Yeah, not a big deal. It's just what goes in your stomach. So the first step is yes, full agreement that you have to balance sympathetic and parasympathetic tone. You need to be able to turn on the adrenaline switch when you're playing, and you need to be able to turn that off when you're not. A lot of times, if there's a depletion of neurotransmitters, especially things like GABA, serotonin, it's harder for people to dial down. One of the signs of that would be, hey, they're not having a good night's sleep. Their HRV is starting to go down. You notice their 2-minute recovery isn't good, or they're accelerating their heart rate too fast when you take them up to load, right? So I think so the first thing is I work at creating balance in their neurochemistry by asking them about that. Now you could look at serum amino acids. There's folks that try to test for neurotransmitters in urine. The problem is those neurotransmitters are coming from the kidney. They're not coming
Yeah.
from your brain. And so I don't even look at that as well. If your kidney was the problem, I'd be saying, okay, but we're trying to make some kind of decision on your brain. And so a lot of times that ends up being almost empiric, but you can look at a cortisol level and you can tell whether A, do they have a high morning cortisol, which is indicative of hyperarousal. The other thing is they could flatten their cortisol curve so that they no longer have a circadian rhythm to their cortisol, which means up in the morning, down at noon, down more at 5 p.m., and then down at bedtime. That's a problem for athletes playing night games because they got to get up, right? So you got to even work harder to countermeasure that. After the game, they got to go, okay, what am I going to do to come down from that rush? And so the first thing is just assessing that. Are you wired? Are you feeling overcommitted? Are you feeling stressed out? What are you feeling like? The next piece is I try to teach them simple things to do. Box breathing. I'm not talking about Wim Hof where somebody might pass out. I'm just talking about
You mean you don't
basic
want to do a
box.
highly sympathetic breath technique when you're trying to downregulate?
I don't know, but I don't think it's a good idea.
No,
So,
I'm in
and it's
agreement with you.
interesting. Yeah, and it's interesting to me, when you think about this, it's really interesting to me that I've got this watch on that's telling me when it's time to take a deep breath, right? 12 times a day, it gives you a time to take a deep breath. Well, aren't we supposed to be breathing deep all the time? And that's actually a feature of sympathetic dominance because the diaphragm gets stuck, you breathe more shallow, and now you're not oxygenating your tissue. So I like people doing box breathing, just the 4 seconds in, hold 4 seconds, 4 seconds out. Think of the stress of the day you want to get rid of during that out breath. Hold it, do that 3 or 4 minutes, and then be grateful at the end for something. I try to get them to do that 2 or 3 times a day, just because I think in general, people just get caught up in traffic, emails, text messages, and all the things of living modern, right? I'm not saying we got to go back to chopping our own wood and no electricity. I'm just saying we got a primitive nervous system in a modern world, and we have to work a little harder to countermeasure against that. I've played a little bit with a lot of the vagal tone stimulators and some of the devices that try to help put
Yeah.
people into parasympathetic tone.
What have you
I
found
say
with
I've been
those?
mixed.
I find mixed results.
I was just gonna say my issue is it's just not consistent. What
Yeah,
I find is consistent is correcting for trace mineral disturbances. For example, an acidotic urine will indicate an excess in hydrogen ions, right? So you've got
sure.
oxidative stress, and that is typically due to a lack of magnesium and potassium. And magnesium is needed to help with that parasympathetic tone. And I find a lot of athletes are usually deficient in magnesium. And I check a red blood cell magnesium. I think it's a lot more accurate.
Don't seem to move much unless you're really messed, is what I've seen. Do you find the
Exactly.
red blood cell one is
Exactly.
much better?
Red blood cell is really good. The serum mag, you got to realize you're going to melt your bone down. You're
Yeah,
going to
you're
melt
gonna
your bone
steal
down
from
to
somewhere
protect your
else.
magnesium and serum. Yeah, you're just melting that bone down, waiting for a stress fracture when you're relying on a serum mag because you're going to protect that serum at all costs because pH is so important on blood,
Yep.
right? Whereas with a red blood cell mag, you're getting more of that tissue level. And so I think mag is so important. So whether it's doing an Epsom salt bath and taking magnesium, I usually recommend 7.5 to 10 milligrams per kilogram body weight on athletes, mainly because I find that they're highly depleted in tissues. And I can't tell you, back in the old Poliquin days, if you remember the Charles Poliquin, I remember when I started teaching there and took that over for a bit. I started teaching the dosing of magnesium, and I had
Yeah.
so many coaches saying to me, I can't believe the difference that makes. And it's, well, it is an essential nutrient. It's involved in making ATP, it's involved in glucose regulation, and it's involved in vasodilation and proper vascular pliability. So it's important. And that's just a couple of the things that it does. And so I think that's a key area, like getting those minerals balanced out really helps with the parasympathetic tone. Doing the breathing helps with parasympathetic tone. Gut health, look, probiotics, it's really important because we know the more an athlete trains, the more they get dysbiotic flora and they start to kill flora off because the blood flow is reduced to the gut. And then those bacteria break down, they release lipopolysaccharide. That crosses the blood-brain barrier. That triggers neuroinflammation and triggers sympathetic tone. So I'm a big fan. And all we got to do is look at runner's diarrhea, right? Or talk
Yeah.
to a lot of athletes, right?
Especially
Hey, you guys run a
long-term,
lot?
long-distance endurance athletes.
Yeah, exactly. And then it's interesting when I talk to a lot of strength coaches, they'll tell me as much as 20 to 25% of their athletes that they're managing on the professional level complain of some kind of GI distress.
Yeah, that's not surprising.
Yeah, and a lot of that's because you're not doing anything for that microbiome. So when people hear microbiome, they go, "Well, I poop normally. I'm pooping good. That's okay, but there's a lot more to your gut than if you're pooping or not, right? And are you having diarrhea or constipation? The fact is you have a nervous system called the enteric nervous system that connects the gut to the brain. And it turns out the gut and the brain are signaling each other. And so I'm big on probiotics. I like DNA verified probiotics. I like probiotics that are guaranteed to the date of expiration. And I like probiotics that when you got a bunch of them in a bottle together, so it's, oh, we got a list of 30 probiotics. Well, did you measure if they were fighting each other? Because
Yeah, there's a
it's
lot of
the Crips in
competition.
the Bloods. Yeah, it's the Crips and the Bloods in that bottle, man. Those guys are going to fight. So you want to find probiotics that have gone through all those paces of understanding that, along with evidence of use in humans, it being beneficial and reducing inflammatory signaling, right? So I think that's a big one. One of my go-tos is I use the Chiodopolis. They're fantastic for that, or the probiotics from Wakunaga, because I really love that they do that kind of testing. It's DNA verified. You've got the strain that was in the studies, right? That's important. And then I think that you've got to really get people to figure out how they're going to get to sleep. I think it's very difficult to get people out of sympathetic dominance, right, without a good night's sleep. A good night's sleep means you're going to restore circadian rhythm of all the hormones that are being secreted the following day in your body, right? Because you've got this suprachiasmatic nucleus, or the master slave clock in your brain, that is telling your body when to release insulin and when to make testosterone, when to make thyroid hormone. What am I doing during what portion of the day? And when you don't sleep well, that becomes a problem. So I will work at also using compounds like theanine, relora. Those are compounds that help to quiet that sympathetic dominance, to lead people. I always tell folks, if you're having trouble sleeping, you need to work on your nervous system during the day, because it's, by the time you do it at night, it's Band-Aid on bullet hole time, right? And you got to correct for the hyperarousal, right? Correct for the hyperarousal of the HPA axis, right? During those daytime hours. And then if you need to use some melatonin, or then if you got to use some Ziziphus or some kind of compound, Honochiol A, whatever you want to use to bring that brain really to go into deep sleep, great. It's going to work great for you. But I find that most people aren't thinking of sleep that way. They're like, oh, it's time to sleep. I need to take something for sleep. And instead of, oh, I'm having trouble sleeping, that's a disorder of hyperarousal. I need to work on my nervous system and create balance. So those are the areas I do it. I do it with lifestyle and breath work. I do it with making sure that we've got adequate trace minerals responsible for parasympathetic tone. Obviously, the big one is giving phospholipids, because phospholipids build acetylcholine is the neurotransmitter for your parasympathetic nervous system. So I'm big on phosphatidylserine, phosphatidylethanolamine, phosphatidylcholine, and making sure you have that reservoir of phospholipids. It's repairing the cell membranes of the brain, repairing your cell membranes in your tissues, and also inducing acetylcholine. I mean, you'll probably geek out on this because I know you're a lab guy. You really love
Oh yeah.
looking at things. We did a study back in my institute in Ohio where I took 10 55 to 70-year-old male and females and cross-matched them. And we did a functional MR, and we did what was called a diazepam tracer, and we measured the acetylcholine to glutamate levels. So
Oh, cool.
glutamate, excitatory, choline, inhibitory, right? Parasympathetic, sympathetic. I gave them phospholipids for 4 weeks and then rescan their brain. And in 8 out of 10 people, they reported thinking more clearly, feeling better. And that paralleled the fact that the phospholipid component of the scan went up because of the use of the phospholipids and making acetylcholine, and the glutamate then came down. And
Hmm.
I think we miss sometimes these very simple things like, oh, I need to build more acetylcholine to help my parasympathetic nervous system, which is going to reduce the inflammatory response of the sympathetic nervous system. And you have to do that in the brain. And then I love the gut because I just think people just mismanage gut health all the time.
Would you throw choline in there too, like just as a choline source, or making sure they have egg yolks or things like that also to help build phospholipids, since
Yeah.
that's a component?
Yeah. Yeah, if they wanted to either take phosphatidylcholine or eat choline-derived foods, that's a part of the plan. The only thing that gets a little sketchy on that is if their gut is really dysbiotic, growing
Yeah, they
bad
might not be
bugs,
converting.
they got some candida, they start pumping a bunch of that choline in them. They might make something called TMAO, trimethylamino
Mm.
oxide, which is an inflammatory compound, right? So I tend to go for more of those choline derived foods. Get a little more meat, get the egg yolks back in there after I've done a little bit of work on cleaning up their gut. Green drinks do a good job of that.
Mm.
Green drinks also help with alkalinizing the urine, reducing the oxidative stress, helping with kind of that gut microbiome a little bit, right? Got the chlorophyll, you're getting some mag. No, those are some simple things that people can do. Obviously, for oxygenation, I know we just we're working on a compound that's called Enduro 2, which is a
Mm.
98% salidroside, which
Mm.
comes from rhodiola.
Oh,
And it
okay.
turns out that it increases VO2 max, improves lactate threshold, and increases tissue oxygen levels. And I
Hmm.
think that's the other piece is that because people are breathing shallow, they're making a
Mm-hmm.
lot of CO2. They got a lot of lactic acid buildup and they got very poor oxygenation. And when you start to combine all that in one, and they're training hard, trying to get anabolic and gain muscle, they start compressing those microcapillaries. And you can measure your microcapillaries, right? And I think that's another issue that people just flat out miss. It's like, hey, it's all about getting oxygen to all your tissues.
So measuring microcapillaries, are you thinking like an endopat, like an FMD type measurement, or what are you looking at for that?
I actually, if you're familiar with the glycocalyx or the inner lining
Yep.
of the artery, you can measure that through a camera. It's actually a wand that they put under the tongue, and they
Oh,
can measure your microcapillaries. And actually, the PhD, Hans Vink, who discovered the glycocalyx, so when you see the pictures of the hairy-like projections of the inner
yeah,
lining of
yeah.
the artery, those are his pictures.
Oh,
And he developed that camera, and it's being
oh,
used at
cool.
over 100 universities and research centers, and now in doctors' offices. You can actually get that machine, and in 3 minutes, you can know the microcapillary status. And it turns out that a lot of athletes, the more heavily muscled they are, especially if they haven't done fascia work, right? They haven't freed their ability to get the oxygen to their tissues. Instead, they've got these ischemic pockets. It turns out their microcapillary scores are in the tank,
Oh, interesting. Huh.
which is yeah, and what's that going to do for their ability to recover from injury?
Yeah, it's definitely going to be hampered.
Yeah, you can't get blood to the tissues. How do you get the nutrients there? And then of course there's other things. If it's a connective tissue bone thing, then you got to worry about what's their hormone levels like, where's their estrogen and testosterone levels as it relates to that healing of that connective tissue bone connection. So there's a lot of factors involved, but the one thing I know for sure, it all starts with oxygen. And the other piece that I'm super passionate about is keeping people out of neuroinflammation, because I know that the more I can keep the brain, the microglial cells from being overactive, the clearer the signals come from the neurotransmitters in your brain to tell your body what to do, how to move, how quick, how slow, what position, what angle. And I always ask people that are lifting weights, when you go up to a bar and you're going to deadlift, for example, everybody can tell me that just when they squeeze the bar,
Yeah, yeah.
before they try to lift it, they either know they're going to get it or they're going to have trouble. And I really believe that's that neurologic signal that if you have more clarity, less inflammation, you're going to fire faster with more force and more consistency of force, right? Repeated reps that are superior as well. So I've been big on, I worked with Corvette Racing and I developed this compound called ginsenoside R3 because
Oh, yeah.
when
Is
we
that the
measured,
one that's in this guy,
yeah,
or is it similar?
yeah, synapsin. There you go.
Yeah, yeah.
Synapsin. Yeah. And how we developed that was that we had them do telemetry and they're racing and we saw their core body temperature was going up and their reflex time was off then, right? So they're not racing as
Mm.
accurate. You're going into turn three at 180 miles an hour. The brain's saying, hit the brake, turn the wheel, and your muscles are going, what? Right?
Yeah.
You know, they're just not answering. And of course, they were not winning races. And we went in, Dr. Heyman, Andy Heyman, my chief medical officer, we went in and we cleaned up their chemistry. But the big thing I did was I created this nasal spray of this ginsenoside R3 before we were able to put it into a liposomal tablet. And we would spray it before they got in the car.
Oh.
And lo and behold, that they won Le Mans. And the drivers said, man, I could tell a huge difference in my accuracy, my braking, my acceleration. They could just tell. And it isn't magic because we've used it in tactical forces. Hey, I shoot more accurate, more consistent. For TBIs, hey, I'm getting back from my injury
Hmm.
quicker. And I think it's very interesting that we haven't paid more attention to that chronic low-grade neuroinflammation. And I think that's what happens, that like what you talked about, those sympathetic monsters that are driving hard for 2 years, their brain's on fire. And
Oh, yeah.
eventually they lose capacity, right? They lose reserve. And the ones that can turn it off and let the sizzle go down, right? The brain's going hot. They're able to turn it off. They're therefore able to restore that neurotransmitter balance and be ready for that next day of work that they've got to do on the field or on the court.
Yeah, our mutual friend Luke Lehman from Muscle Nerds, we both were comparing notes once, and we both got really into lactate testing probably 3 or 4 years ago, and we found
Sure.
both of us compared notes, and we found the same thing, that the athletes and clients that were super, super stressed, some of them were spinning off 2, 3, 4 millimolar of lactate at rest before they did anything. And I was like, holy crap, because the first time you told me you had measured that, and I'm like, I don't know. I like measured a few people, and so I took the train wreck people, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like you're so stuck on that sympathetic carbohydrate use end that your lactate levels are sky high before you've done any exercise. Like your body is taken that whole system and ramped it up to try to deal with the stress that's going on.
Yeah, and I think a lot of what goes on there is they go into aerobic glycolysis, right? Because
Yep.
they're no longer efficient at transporting glucose. So when you're under that constant cortisol adrenaline piece, you start becoming insulin resistant. So your insulin receptor's not functioning well. So now you start taking glucose into the muscle or into your cells, all your cells, not just muscle, but you're taking that in passively. So you go through the GLUT1 door for glucose delivery instead of GLUT4. And that's a difference between 30 plus packets of energy and a little bit of lactic acid waste to 2 packets of energy and a bunch of lactic acid and pyruvate waste, right? And so even at rest, that's why diabetics, their endurance and stamina is so poor usually because they're a
Mm-hmm.
2 pack for energy, lots of lactate chemistry. And I remember when I first got onto that, I participated in writing a textbook called Diabetes and Cancer, Epidemiologic Evidence and Molecular Links. Talk about something that'll get you to sleep at night. Open up any page of that book. You are done. Like one paragraph. It's like, I don't know if I'm going to sleep now. But it really drilled into me, and I really do believe this, that all paths lead to disturbances in glucose regulation. That whether it's I'm under stress or it's my diet or I'm overtraining or I'm not getting enough sleep. And one of the reasons I believe that is I look at the GLP-1 craze that's going
Yeah.
on now where everybody, hey, I can get weight to come off no matter what. I'm using this GLP-1, and that's because when people get in that sympathetic tone and they get into aerobic glycolysis, they start making a bunch of glucagon. And so you can never access your fat, even when
Yep.
you exercise. So people say, I trained hard, I exercised, I ate exactly what you told me. I only lost 1 pound over 8 weeks. Well, that's because at the beginning of the talk, as I said, your metabolic circuits are broke. You don't have the right signaling to get to your fat, right? So it's interesting when you start to see that because I see a lot of athletes with blood sugars in the mid 90s on fasting. And by default, that tells me they've already started to break their glucose regulation ability.
Yeah. And through my lens, I agree 100%. So I think of it in terms of metabolic flexibility, right? You're so stuck in that carbohydrate end of the spectrum, you can't downregulate, you can't drop insulin to actually use fat at low to moderate intensity exercise. You're just trying to get out of this stress loop. Your poor body is using a high stress pathway to get energy because it is under such a high amount of stress. So you get like stuck
100%.
on that end.
That's exactly right. And it's that cascading effect that occurs once you get there. You end up creating more bad actor lipids.
Yep.
You end up creating problems in your iron to ferritin ratio. All of a sudden, you're not storing ferritin. Your iron's not going to ferritin because you upregulated your hepcidin due to that metabolic stress. And when it gets bad enough, when you become a full-blown diabetic, well, then you're storing too much ferritin, right? And your ferritin goes through the roof. But that reality, there's certain things I really like, and I love supplements. Otherwise, I wouldn't have written 26 books with them in them. So
Yeah.
I guess I'm kind of a fan of supplements. Uh, I love aged garlic extract. I love
Mm.
kyolic because man, I don't know of a single supplement that lowers IL-6 and TNF alpha. It reduces inflammatory lipids. It improves blood pressure, 12 systolic, 6 diastolic. It's reducing that sympathetic duress on the blood vessels. It's just doing, and then they just did a recent study on it where it showed middle-aged athletes, they improved their recovery, increased their VO2 max, decreased their lactate by taking that. And I
Mm.
think that while there's other things that are good, you use things to get your nitric oxide up. I love the 98% salidroside for the pure oxygen play of increasing oxygen, increasing VO2 max. That global pattern that we have to be concerned with, of course, if it's not, it's the athlete that's retired is, well, where does their cardiovascular system end up?
Yeah, yeah.
Are they plaquing? Are their microcapillaries compromised? Are they losing their perfusion into their tissues? I see more and more people, athletic, muscular people with poor kidney function. Their glomerular filtration rate is low, and that's because blood vessels are tight. You're getting more oxidative stress in the kidneys, and that leads to damage in your kidneys, and now you can't filter. Fortunately, you can turn that around. But I look at that aged garlic is almost pleiotropic. So I think it's pretty interesting as a compound. And then obviously I don't know, I've never met a supplement I didn't like. So I think there's a lot of ones that can have value. Cordyceps for oxygenation is really cool, right? But I think in general, even on supplements, it's people end up thinking the bro science stuff instead of getting good foundational information on quality ingredients. Like just because cordycep's been on the market for 25 years doesn't mean it's not good to still use if you get the right kind, right? I know there's Tibetan goji berries out right now, and they've been picked by a monk while a white tiger was chasing him, and he was staying in his parasympathetic tone while he was picking them. And then we grind those up, right? That kind of stuff is, I can't help but laugh a little bit because I've just been in this business so long. And taking nutrients and eating better really can have a just dramatic impact, not just on if you're in your playing days, it's great. I want to help people play longer, but I want them to come out of the game they're in, whether it's college and they're done, high school and they're done, pro athlete finishing, you're coming out of there still whole. You're coming out of there healthy. You've created homeostasis and allowed that higher order of demand for you to be able to do it, but you have metabolic reserve and resiliency at the end of it all.
Yeah, I agree. And I think with supplements, I'm actually a fan of supplements, but again, it's what does the research say? What are they used for? What is the indication? When do you use it? And then also just being realistic with what are the effect size. In general, you're talking like single digit percentages, which again, to elite athletes is like a massive difference to someone whose, again, diet looks like a floating trash bin fire. Like you can't just toss supplements at it and expect to solve all their issues either, which is the other thing I see. I'm not saying you do this, but I'm saying in the industry, it seems to be supplements are shit, they don't work, or they'll solve everything.
Yeah, and it's so funny. We're two brothers from another mother on this, right? Because in all of my clinics, all and everything I teach at the American Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine, because I'm the co-chair, there's 15,000 docs there, right? The International Peptide Society, I'm the chair of. I always emphasize you have to have someone in your office teaching people how to eat.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it isn't learning how to order the biggie meal that's 50% off on Wednesday because you get a free shake when you order on Wednesdays too, right? I always say the one thing everybody needs to do, everybody needs to eat, everybody needs to hydrate. We know that if you go 5 days without water, it's going to be bad for you. Everybody needs to eat, everybody needs to hydrate, and everybody needs to sleep. And then it becomes, well, how do you need to eat? Do you have any sensitivities? Are you a gluten sensitive person because your gut got broken down? Is it dairy? For me, it was dairy. Dairy
Hmm.
for me, I can't eat dairy. It's absolutely miserable for me because I'm Italian. I want dairy.
Oh no.
I mean, yeah, I can't have cow's dairy. I get really phlegmy. I can feel it. I hold water, and you look at that, and it's okay. So what are the right foods that I can eat that decrease my inflammation and histaminic response? And then you can get into, okay, what are we going to do for performance? Are we going to work on increasing your capacity for your brain? Are we going to get into upregulating mitochondrial energy production? We're going to add some CoQ10 and peak. What are we looking for your particular metabolic roadblocks that you have? Is it simply a gut thing? You're a kid that was on a bunch of antibiotics and therefore you got no good flora, your gut's permeable, and so now you're not even absorbing your nutrients when you take them. So good luck taking a bunch of pills. You're not going to get there. And That's the other thing over the years. When I started out, I used to think, God, I got to give people a lot of stuff. And over the last 40 years, it's more about, no, I just have to pick the right stuff. And
Yeah.
I
Where's
can
the
get
leverage?
by giving people less if I make sure I'm tailored to what they need. And I think that's a key thing too, is more isn't better. I'll have people come to me on quote longevity protocols with 4 pages of an Excel
Yeah.
spreadsheet. I'm like, what, yeah, yeah, how do you have time to do this? And then I'll look at their labs. They come through the clinic. I got my doc, my nurse practitioner. I look at what they got going on. And it's, well, your blood sugar's still 95, man. You're
Yeah.
still at a 60% risk of being a person with diabetes with a 95 blood sugar. Or depending on which, study you look at. If you're looking at the Kaiser study that was 47,000 lives over 10 years, it was 6% for every point over 84. The Japanese study that recently came out on 31,000 lives was 9% for every point over 90.
Hmm.
So people don't understand, and then you start to combine that, right? So my glucose is up, my insulin's up, my lactic acid dehydrogenase is up, right? My lactate's up, my blood pressure is a little off, my electrolytes are low. And all of a sudden you got this string of pearls saying, "Oh, you're a mess."
Yeah.
Okay, let's get started. Let's get started on that. Let's take those 4 pages of your spreadsheet and burn them.
Yeah.
And then let's start to figure out what you really need to do. And that's like your point. It's that person that thinks about just take all these cool supplements and peptides and get bioidentical hormones. I'm going to be amazing, but I'm not going to pay attention to my diet or my stress or my sleep. So it's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. It seems like even with social media and everything else, everybody wants the quick fix. And I get it. Like everyone's looking for leverage, looking for the latest, greatest. They want new. But as from being around forever is there's no single bullet. There are things that can definitely help. There's things that definitely can have large amounts of leverage, but it's rarely one particular thing. So even like one of the biggest changes I made probably 4 or 5 years ago was just putting stuff in phases. So, hey, we're going to work on your aerobic metabolism now. I like things like CoQ10, PQQ, like the stuff you mentioned, but we're also going to train the shit out of your aerobic system while you're taking those to try to get it to a high enough level we can for a set period of time. We're going to keep that on maintenance, and we'll probably even maybe pull you off some of those and then work on the next thing instead of trying to dump everything in the kitchen sink and expect everything to work. It just doesn't work that way.
Yeah, and my big pet peeve that I've been working on, and it's very similar to that, is that people always want to do things to optimize.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
optimize means you're always pushing your mitochondria. And that curiosity effect, right? Hey, we're gonna work hard now because we're focusing here, but then we're gonna take a rest from it and move to something else. That's really important because I talked to this mitochondrial screening company and they've got a interesting test that's validated to punch biopsies. And they said they tested some, I'd say, known biohackers in the market. And they said, you know what? There's the people, hey, I'm doing IVs. I got it all going in me, right? I'm doing an IV while I'm in my ice plunge. I got my glasses on. I'm doing my vagal stimulator all at one time, right? And those folks end up having more issues with their mitochondria than even average folks. And I think it goes back to that thought of, I know it's weird, but common sense does matter. And then you need, yeah, it's an odd concept, I know. And it's also this fact that make informed decisions. Don't just take some social media post. My son has me on social media. 9 months ago, I actually searched my name on the internet for the first time.
It's
Yeah,
kind of humbling, isn't it?
I'm in that age group. No, I'm in that age group where I didn't know it. And all of a sudden I was, wow, there's a lot of stuff with me on here. So I started doing social media, obviously, just because you need to.
Yeah.
And I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying it. I really am. But I would ask people, question what I say in 30 seconds,
No, sure.
you know? Like you'll find out who's well informed and who's not relatively quickly because you have a lot of that type of information that just gets dumped out there and it's not based on great evidence. When I've done enough work educating that you got to find that evidence, what's working. And then, hey, if you've got something that doesn't have a lot of evidence yet, but you got a hunch on it, guess what? You're going to look at what happens when you do it and you're going to be able to find out, hey, did that really work in that group of people? And I've also done that over the years and found some great compounds based on doing that.
Yeah, and that's the art of it too. I've often joked when, not really joked, but if somebody comes out with some brand new compound and there's no data on it, like a lot of people are like, well, it doesn't work. There's no data. I'm like, if there's no data, that means we don't know if it works or not. Like you can't assume that it's not going to work. Like odds are it may not. Odds are it's probably not going to be a game changer, but things like creatine, caffeine, things that have been around forever that have just monumental amounts of data, those things exist and do have pretty significant upsides. And there's always a risk and a side effect to everything, but you can't just assume that it's always going to be a negative either.
That's exactly it. That's right. I think that's go on chemistry and you take a look at what is published and then you go from there. But obviously you want to do things that you think have a good chance at working because the last time I checked, people don't come to work with you if you're not having success with them.
Yeah. Shocker.
It's like, hey, let me give you some more money because you're not
Yeah.
helping me at all. And I've been pretty passionate about that. I actually, when I teach healthcare providers and performance leads, I always tell them, you got to pick the things that people are going to feel a difference.
Yeah.
And that means you got to change their diet and you got to pick the nutrients that they take and they go, wow. And you got to do that relatively quickly. You can't expect them to hang in with you for a year. You want to get them going and feeling better. In 4 weeks, they should be noticing something, right? Something positive should be shifting somewhere.
Yeah. And related to that, on your dose of magnesium, is that elemental? What type of magnesium? Because there's everything from magnesium oxide, which has a friggin' 4% conversion, is basically fucking worthless, to other ones that are higher converting, but there's, I don't know, 12 different versions now. Like, any more details, or what do you kind of recommend in that world? That
Sure.
could be its
Sure.
own
It
podcast.
is elemental.
Okay.
Yeah, no, it is elemental. So elemental mag. And you're gonna have to do that. You have to spread it out. If you're a
Oh yeah,
100
you're
kilo person,
gonna.
you're going to take 1,000 milligrams all at once, or you're going to be running to the bathroom. So you want to spread that out over the day. And plus it's better to spread it out over the day to get better maximum absorption. I'm a big fan of magnesium bisglycinate. I think it's easy on the gut. It absorbs well. I like the Albion, the Trax amino acid chelate version. It's a
Okay.
double ligand bonded one. Magtarate's
This
good if
glycinate
people
tastes
have
horrible though.
Yeah, what? You're not willing to just take anything in order to get better results?
Yeah, I've taken it, but trying to get clients to sign off on that one
Yeah,
is
well,
a
you got to get
little.
it in a cap. You
Yeah, I
got to
put
do
it
it
in a
as a
cap.
capsule.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just put it in a capsule. Magtarate is good, especially if they're having more like palpitations. They're sympathetic dominant and they're getting a little bit of palpitations. So magtarate is good. Both of them will be around 20% elemental magnesium per capsule. So a 500 milligram capsule will yield 100 milligrams. I always tell people that minimum threshold for mag is get 500 milligrams elemental a day if you're training. That's the minimum. Mag threonate, while it's great for the nervous system, you don't get a lot of magnesium in it. 3 capsules, 2,000
Yeah.
milligrams, you're getting 144 milligrams of magnesium. I like mag malate, but for women, if they've got IBS, if you have any kind of GI stuff, the malate sometimes is a little tough on them. But obviously, malate's got those great studies on getting rid of lactate out of the muscle.
Yep.
So you'll see all these blends where 20% malate and 50% glycinate, 12% taurate, whatever. It's like a mutt of magnesium. I tend to use the bisglycinate. It's easy to absorb. It's gentle. People don't complain. They don't see many GI issues with it. And then just space it out over the day. And I think if you're training more than an hour a day or you're training hard, you got to get that in. Nobody's eating 10 servings of dark leafy greens and drinking chlorophyll because you get mag from chlorophyll, right? Because the center of the chlorophyll molecules
Yeah,
and
little guy in the
magnesium.
middle.
The little guy in the middle, just like with when you're eating a steak, that little guy in the middle of that heme iron is iron. And but nobody's doing that, right? And I think those are important things to keep in mind. People are on the run. Usually they're eating quick. They're not sitting there getting that big bowl of greens like I would like them to. I know I do it a lot of days to try to get them in a lot. And so therefore, by default, they're usually going to be deficient in mag. And I rarely have somebody test a red blood cell magnesium that's 5.6 or higher, which is my goal, 5.6 to 6.2. They're rarely there. It's usually in the high fours or the low fives. A lot of times the low fours, because the range is
Mm.
like 4.2 to 6.6. They'll be right at 4.2 or 4.4. They're complaining of, yeah, my legs feel heavy when I go up steps, and gee, I'm cramping more. Okay. And so that's a big one, right? So I think if there was one thing I think everybody that exercises should do is take magnesium. That's for me, that's number one. And then you think about, if you're training for, you're getting a lot of endurance training in, you got to think about the probiotics. You got to think about keeping the urine alkaline. People could buy urine, they can buy pH strips, right? They can get a
Yeah, yeah.
roll of pH strips. They get them in 0.2 measurements, and you tear them, and you can tear that roll off and do a first morning urine. And if your urine pH is 5.5, you better get on getting some magnesium on board. It should be at least 6.5. And they've published studies on this, even in people when they corrected their blood pressure, corrected their lipids with medication, and corrected their glucose. So the big three of metabolic syndrome, right? Get your blood pressure better, get your glucose better, get your lipids better. If they did not correct for urine pH, all right, they continued to progress their renovascular damage and had endothelial dysfunction.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was both in diabetic and non-diabetic populations that they did
Oh,
those
interesting.
studies. Yeah, so it makes sense because if I'm creating that oxidative damage and I've got that acidotic urine, I'm putting pressure on the renal capillary system.
Sure.
40% of people are hypertensive because they've got renal hypertension, right? They've got a lot of adrenaline, back to that sympathetic monster. When you're making a lot of adrenaline, those blood vessels get stiff. And when the blood vessels get stiff, you're not delivering blood and oxygen and nutrients to the tissues that need it for repair for the next day.
Very cool. As we wrap up here, if you've got a few more minutes, I wanted to ask you about, so on the supplements you did, I noticed you did a lot of liposomal formulations, and talk to us about the industry and liposomal delivery, because I've chatted with other people who have done liposomal delivery directly. I won't name what companies, and we'll say the quality of said product after a few months on the shelf is extremely variable, to say the least.
Well, and that's because it was because it was probably a liquid. Liposomal liquids,
Yeah.
what they do is it's almost like two magnets that are pushing each other apart so the particles stay small, but eventually that polar attraction comes back and then the particles start to agglomerate. Now you got this huge molecule that can't be absorbed. I got onto this because of talking to a pharmaceutical scientist that had these worldwide patent pending for all drugs, all nutrients on solid state liposomes, where
Hmm.
you take a small particle under 100 nanometers, which crosses the blood-brain barrier. When you're around 100 nanometers, you will get cellular absorption. And they could prove that after 2 years through electron microscopy and fluoroscopy, they can show that the particles are still in that distribution under
Oh,
100
wow.
nanometers. And so we know that the stability is there because we can see it based on sampling under electron microscopy. And that creates the ability to take difficult to absorb compounds and micronize them, put them in that solid state liposome and be able to get them to absorb. So things like glutathione, berberine, curcumin, a lot of different compounds. That synapsin that you showed, that's a tough one because doing that orally, that RG3 orally, it's just too expensive. You couldn't afford to take enough
Mm.
of it orally to get it to get through and get absorbed. And so when we did that, we were just crazy surprised at how effective it was. And it's interesting how you get these scientific breakthroughs. My son's a linebacker at Utah State. His roommate, defensive end at Utah State, they're probably playing beer pong for all I know. And they asked a very difficult question. They said, "What's your dad do?" And his dad and grandfather had developed this technology. My son knew of all the work that I have done and was
Hmm.
in the dietary supplement industry. And so we actually met based on those two roommates
Oh, wow. That's
talking about
wild.
that. It's cool, really.
Yeah,
Serendipity, right? Yeah. And so we've done more than play with it. We're very serious about it because what we're seeing consistently is that people feel the product. They notice a significant difference when they take it. And that's always my beef about dietary supplements. If you don't feel something or see a change in your labs, especially
yeah.
feel something, why am I taking this? Right. And so I've always tried to design products that were impactful. And that meant stronger doses, the standardized extract exactly used in the studies, and then in combinations from what I would call a new Chinese medicine way of doing it, of looking at formulating around the problem, right? What are the different mechanisms that relate to a problem? And what the solid state liposomes allow us to do is take very difficult to absorb compounds and get them to absorb and create some really eye-opening. People go, wow, these things really work. And so it's pretty exciting.
That's cool. And I also mentioned you do have a liposomal oral BPC 157, correct?
Yeah, we do. And that, once again, is a dietary supplement, works great. And we've had tremendous feedback from physicians as well as people that are allowed to take it. Obviously, if you're being drug tested, you
Right.
cannot take BP 157. It's on the ban list, so don't do it. But for those that aren't tested, the BPC 157 has been just phenomenal results because we're enhancing its absorption.
What are the results have you seen from that? Is it mostly like general soft tissue repair, or have you have seen some like gut repair too, or is it more soft tissue because you're bypassing the oral gut?
Yeah, it's good. It's good. Well, you're chewing it up, so it does get down through the
So some
gut.
will
And
get
we've
down.
seen, yeah, we do see have people get improvement in their sensitivities and allergies. We do have people that we had a guy that had an Achilles tear, got and was chewing that stuff up, and 6 weeks later he's squatting.
Wow.
Pretty amazing, right? So we're finding it to be effective for repair, both in the connective tissue, muscle tissue, but then the gut, it's working very well. Yeah, it's very PPC is an interesting compound. Not a lot of human studies on that, but
There's almost
yet,
none. I kept looking for it like years ago. Had this discussion with Luke, and I'm like, I don't know, man. And so I went and tried to find any human studies I could. I did this again 4 months ago. There's very few. I was shocked. I was like, what? Seems crazy.
yeah, I know because everybody knows how well that compound works. It's something that's out there. And then, of course, FDA put it on the do not compound list,
Right.
category do not compound. So now
Yep.
you can't get the injectable and you can't get it from a compounding pharmacy. So it's regulated to that dietary supplement category, which is fine if you can find a way to deliver it. And yeah, I that's one of those that hey, there are really no human studies of any magnitude, but yet everybody's used it, very popular, and they're going, hey, we don't care. It helps me to feel better. I hurt less. I feel better. My gut's better. I'm going to go ahead and use that.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you so much for all your time. Where can people find more about you? I know you've got the supplement line, Metabolic Elite, and you've got a ton of stuff on the Instagram and everywhere else. So where are some of the best places?
The real Jim LaValle. So real Jim LaValle on Instagram, jimlavale.com. If people are interested in that Kyolic or the probiotics, I'm a huge fan of. You can go to kyolic.com. They've got 900 publications, well over 150 studies on aged garlic extract, and they're the company that does all the DNA verified probiotics. So I'm a huge fan of them as well.
Awesome. And I also wanted to say your book, which is a few years old, is phenomenal. My buddy Dan Garner recommended it to me, and I've been making my way through that, and it's super useful. It's very well laid out. It tells you the basics, but gives you all these little significant like pearls along the way too. For I don't know, what you sell it for, $20 or something on Amazon. I would highly recommend that if people are interested in it.
Oh, I appreciate that. And I'm actually editing the new edition of that. So
Oh,
I'm going
cool.
to have a new edition of Your Blood Never Lies. That'll be out here shortly. I'm finishing the last 100 pages of just nips and tucks, and we'll have that out.
Cool. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Would highly encourage everyone to check out all your stuff. And yeah, thank you for putting out all the books and the content and everything over the years too. I really appreciate it. It's been amazing.
I really appreciate that. And hey, by the way, congratulations on second edition on triphasic training, man.
Yes, thank you. It's finally out. It took 9 years. Writing books, especially with other people, is not the easiest thing in the world. But yeah, we're super
But you got
happy
the
it's finally
easiest
out. And
co-author to work with. They got the
you what?
easiest co-author to work with in the world.
Oh my God. I love Cal, but if you met Cal, he it's crazy because he has like these amazing ideas. Like he's doing stuff like no one else has done. He does the research, he does all the stuff. I've known Cal for 20 years. But
Right.
the hardest part was trying to put that in a systematic view for people who don't know him and are not familiar to the system, and to have it make sense and have it
Right.
be still legit, like his stuff, and not changing it just to put it in a book. Yeah, that was the
Right.
hardest part. And I'm
Right.
I'm sure with your stuff too, it's like how do you organize it and get it in an order where people who are new to your stuff can go, oh, this was good, this was good, this was good. That's usually always I find the hardest part, but the most valuable for the readers and everyone else at the end of the day too.
Yeah, there's a real art to it. So, well, congratulations. I'm glad you persevered and got it out.
Yeah, me too. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
All right. You have a good one.
Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. Really appreciate it. Huge thanks to James LaValle for coming on the podcast. So great to talk to him, especially someone who I followed his stuff, like I said, for over 2 decades now, to sit down and have a chat about all the great stuff he's got going on. I really highly recommend you check out everything from his books to courses to all the in-person stuff he does, his supplement line at Metabolic Elite. Really great stuff. Love all the things that he's doing there. If you're looking for ketones to put you in a state of ketosis that don't taste horrible, check out my friends over at Tecton Ketone Esters. We'll put a link to the code down below there. And also Element, if you're looking for an electrolyte supplement, you can check that out down below there also. And make sure to sign up to my newsletter if you want more great information. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast as always. Really appreciate it. If you could hit the old subscribe button or download or give us some likes, if you could even leave us a comment, that makes a huge difference in the distribution of the podcast, helping out with all the old algorithms there. So thank you so much. Really appreciate it. We'll talk to all of you next week.
There's something wrong with this hearing aid.
Yeah, what's wrong?
I can't hear with it.
Oh, no wonder. It's too far away.
This podcast is for informational purposes only. The podcast is not intended as a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. You should not use the information on the podcast for diagnosing or treating a health problem or disease or prescribing any medication or other treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider before taking any medication or nutritional supplement, and with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard on this or any other podcast. Reliance on the podcast is solely at your own risk. Information provided on the podcast does not create a doctor-patient relationship between you and any of the health professionals affiliated with our podcast. Information and statements regarding dietary supplements are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. Opinions of guests are their own, and this podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements made by guests. This podcast does not make any representations or warranties about guest qualifications or credibility. Individuals on this podcast may have a direct or indirect financial interest in products or services referred to therein. If you think you have a medical problem, consult a licensed physician.